Hi everyone. This episode is actually answering some questions that I've been asked in the comments, which I quite enjoy getting. Always nice to have some ideas for content, but also, you know what? If I'm going to make these videos, why not make them relevant? So let's get into it. Okay, so these these questions have been asked to me. It's all on the topic of mouthpieces. It's something we've been discussing in a number of comment threads on the YouTube videos. And so I'm just going to go through them one by one. Hopefully, I'll give you the information you need. So number one, I've been asked. Number one, how, get to the point. How does mouthpiece weight impact overtones and general playability? Okay, so obviously the best way to answer this question is with demonstration. And so I have prepared a little bit of recording in which I play a scale, I play a high note, and I play two little excerpts. I play part of a melody, a jazz tune, and I play part of a Louis Armstrong introduction to West End blues. And I do it with these two mouthpieces. Now what I've got here, this is my Neoteric Brass Artiste model mouthpiece, which I've used a lot. This is basically the one that I have used almost exclusively for about getting on for 2 years now. Now, those of you who are familiar with my Neoteric Brass mouthpieces will know that actually the legacy model is the one that sells better. It's more popular. That's because it's just got a slightly larger cup volume, so that makes it a little bit more forgiving, but it also gives you a far broader range of tone that you can get from a mouthpiece than this one, which is basically a lead trumpet mouthpiece. I would recommend this to anyone who wants to play lead trumpet, whether they be into TCE or not. It's basically your kind of drop V style cup, with the very comfortable Dominic Calicchio rim that I like, and this one's got a straighter, longer back bore on it. So it's very much a lead trumpet mouthpiece, though you will hear in the video, in the recording that I've made, it's a very dry recording, so there's no effects added, no EQ, no reverb or anything like that. But you will hear that you can actually, when you play at quieter dynamics, you can make a perfectly usable jazz tone with a very small mouthpiece like this when you play in an efficient way. You will hear three distinctly different tone qualities. The first one being when I play the scale and the high note. The second one being when I play there will be another U, there will never be another U, and the third when I play the Louis Armstrong. And this is kind of this is where I'm getting into answering the question. Not yet. The other mouthpiece I've used is in fact the same mouthpiece. So if you look at them side by side, you'll see that they've got the same cup, they've got the same rim. Yeah, this one's gold plated, no big deal there. But this mouthpiece here is made in a different blank. That's a service that Venture can offer you, where they they supply the mouthpiece designs that you send them, and they can create them, in a number of different blanks. They've got loads on file. You can have it look identical to a Vincent Bach, for example, which honestly, if I'd known about Venture mouthpieces 5 years ago, I'd have had them made me a Calit Super Chops 3, looks identical to a Vincent Bach, and I'd have them print 1.5C on the side, because honestly, people, this will actually lead us into answering question number two, but let's not skip ahead. So this mouthpiece here is modeled after a Jerome Calit Magnum blank, which was something that he was doing in the 90s. Jerome Calit believed that although heavyweight mouthpieces are a good idea, that most companies put the weight in the wrong place. You'll see that this mouthpiece has an obscene amount of weight on the rim. I mean, this one's quite lightweight anyway, so when compared, this weighs about 100 grams. This plays about 150 grams, so it's literally half as heavy again. You can see he also put a little bit of weight on the top of the shank here, and the idea behind that is that it will help to stabilize. So I don't buy into a lot of what some people, some famous trumpet makers online will tell you about weight, but all I'm going to talk to you about today specifically is how it feels, how it sounds, and what effect that has on me as a player, because that's really all we need to know. So obviously you're going to hear the recordings. What I would say is this: when I play these two mouthpieces side by side, the lighter one, to me, as from the player's perspective, sounds a little bit, say, brighter. So maybe it's got higher overtones, but actually it's not just bright. It sounds a little bit like it's got what you would call, what Jerome Khaled would have called sizzle. It's where you get this very high-pitched hiss almost in your sound, which is actually representative of the presence of overtones. And it can be a bit disconcerting. You think, gosh, do I sound airy when I play out front? Do people hear this tss? Okay, that's why it's important for me to have made the recordings, because the answer is no, not at all. Nobody hears that. It's something that seems to exist around you as a player, but the sound that it's projecting forward doesn't contain that hiss. That does not exist when I use the heavier mouthpiece. What I hear with the heavier mouthpiece is almost like, from the player's perspective, it sounds like I'm using a bigger mouthpiece. And so the sound is thicker. Now, what the effect that has is that, you know, when you hear yourself, you respond and react to what you hear. This is an instinctive thing that happens with all of us, and we can't really control it all that well. You know, this is one of the things when I was talking in a previous video, I think it was episode 14, about the trumpet being an acoustic instrument, and that the sound needs space within which to develop. And as advanced players, we're very conscious of that sound that exists around us, and we react to it. So when I pick up this heavier mouthpiece, and to me, let's say it sounds thicker, it sounds darker, I'm going to respond to that, and I tend to back off. Especially when I'm trying to play quietly on that mouthpiece, I'll back off and maybe even start missing notes because I'm trying to be too delicate about it. It feels like you can't play softer on it. However, that's not actually the case at all. When you listen to the recording, you may notice a subtle difference, but not one that will be heard by 99.9% of people. If I was to record you some music, especially, and this is the most important thing really, especially as part of an ensemble, because, you know, solo trumpet recorded by itself with no other instruments is very rare. That's not, you know, unless I was to do you a recording of Arben's characteristic studies, for example, or the Charlier or something like that, you know. If I were to do a recording like that and it was just trumpet and nothing else, then you may be able to hear subtleties, and I might choose one of those mouthpieces based upon which one of them makes me feel comfortable when I play, because that's the most important thing. Now, in an ensemble, nobody will hear the difference. So really what you've got to think is, do I want this little bit of extra weight that's going to support my sound a little as I hear it, for the sake of me feeling more comfortable when I play? What I find is, when I've used these two mouthpieces in a big band setting, which is a lot of the playing I do these days, if I used a heavier one, sometimes I get the sensation that it's a little bit too easy to play. And this is something that maybe needs to be addressed in another video. I'm planning on talking about efficiency and that sort of business. But actually, you know, in something that is interesting when you address the topic of ideology in trumpet pedagogy is that, yes, we all want to play very efficiently, but we have to be conscious of the fact that it feels good to try hard, and that it's just human nature to overblow at times, if we feel that the music requires that. Now, that's not to say that I would recommend it ever. We don't want to overblow. That's not how to play the trumpet. It actually serves literally no purpose. The harder you blow, the worse you sound, the less control you have, etc., etc. But it could happen, and when you've got a mouthpiece which is super efficient, it's much easier to overblow on it, and so just bear that in mind. That's all I'm going to say. So listen to the recordings. What I would actually recommend is, I'd even be tempted to have 2 copies of this video open side by side and listen to them, listen to the scale on one mouthpiece, listen to the scale on the other, listen to the tune on one mouthpiece, listen to the tune on the other, back to back, and just go flick back and forth between them. I'd be surprised if you can hear any valuable difference. You know, I think what I was starting to say before and never finished was that if I was to make a recording using either of these mouthpieces, I would never be able to tell you which one I had used afterwards, based purely on the sound. So the heavier mouthpiece in this instance feels a little easier to play. It sounds a little darker to me as a player, but out the front, nobody will ever know. And so that's an important thing. Now, I think that if you were to go down the path of having a heavyweight trumpet, heavyweight valve caps, maybe a bit of extra brass around the bell bow or something like that, you get into the territory of damping and in some ways making the instrument more, you would say, easier to play, but doesn't sound as interesting. There's a really good video that K.O. Skinsness has done from the Stomvy USA channel, where he talks about damping, and he will explain it 10 times better than me. So I would recommend going and watching that video. Anyway, so here is where I'm going to insert my recordings of the 2 mouthpieces. Bear in mind, idle bank holiday Monday, just picked up a trumpet, played some stuff. So just like everything on this video, never an example of my best playing, but I hope you find it helpful. All right then. So question 2. Do you have any opinions on Jettone mouthpieces for marching band? Okay, so here's the thing. Jettone mouthpieces, this is probably the stuff you want to know. First of all, you need to know what era your Jettone mouthpiece was made in. If it is a modern Jettone, it's not a Jettone. I actually had a Jettone Studio B or something back in about 2011, and it was one of these modern ones, and it was nothing like an actual Jettone mouthpiece. It was just some small mouthpiece with a horrible round rim on it that it sounded all right. I found a recording of me playing a show on it, and it actually didn't sound too bad, but it was in the days when I wasn't used to playing on shallow gear, and so yeah, interesting recording. So if you're gonna what I want to do is talk about vintage Jettones, which were handmade by Ratzenberger on a lathe. Now, the characteristics of that mouthpiece is that generally they had quite flat rims, and they had an extreme alpha angle. I think if you read, there's quite a well-known alpha angle article online, which I assume maybe written by GR or something like that. But there's a chart, and they compare the alpha angles of various mouthpieces. Now, they're all measured at a certain depth of, the depth where the rim meets the cup, and that's not all the same for different brands, and it's basically impossible to compare a Bach to a Schilke in that way, for example. But what they say on that article is that the Jettone has got a 0 degrees alpha angle. That means like a 90-degree angle going from the rim into the cup. And so some players find that very difficult to play on. It may help to improve articulations, but it may also just pinch the lips in a way that causes it to be difficult to vibrate. Now, it says in the comment here that the player has a Jettone Severinsen model. I actually should have glanced at that before. It's quite likely that that's an older one. It's quite likely that I know a player who has had one of those mouthpieces and they quite liked it. They do have a nice sound. What am I going to? Okay, so what I was going to say before when I mentioned the Calet Magnum mouthpiece is that a hell of a lot of trumpet players out there are hearing with their eyes. They will look at what equipment you're using, and they will judge before you've put it up to your mouth. What I think is very important is that if I was to sit, I've done a recording today with two variations on the same mouthpiece. But if I was to sit here and record with 5 different mouthpieces made by 5 different brands, Bach, Schilke, I don't know, Yamaha, Jettone, Jerome Calet, there would be Warburton, there would be different characteristics that come from these mouthpieces. They're going to be smaller, they're going to be bigger, they're going to have a bigger throat, a smaller throat, a rounder rim, a flatter rim, blah blah blah, back bore size, all of these variations. But what you will find overall is that on every recording it will sound like I am playing the trumpet, because it's the sound that comes from my head and the result of the techniques that I have practiced. Those are the elements that go into creating my trumpet sound. If you look back at those recordings that I just showed you, I've demonstrated that I can create a really soft, fluid, what people might like as a jazz tone on There Will Be Another, No, Never Be Another You. I have done a more trad style attack when I did the Louis Armstrong excerpt, and then I did the TCE exercise style scale at the beginning, and those are 3 distinctly different trumpet tones, and I create those 3 distinctly different trumpet tones with my brain. I cannot objectively tell you what difference there was. What I can tell you what was the same, and that is my tongue position, the way that I would describe tone production on a trumpet is to pressurize the air inside your body, and then to articulate by spitting that out. But I'm going to do that softer, I'm going to do it harder, I'm going to do it faster or slower, and then I can use more air or less air to get a louder or a softer sound. These things, it doesn't really differ from any other approach to playing, because obviously your technique doesn't change the physics of brass playing. But the point is that the subtle variations that happen as a result of me being an experienced musician are equal to, if not greater than, the difference that changing from one mouthpiece to another will make. It's one of those, it's really interesting when you reflect on the video that I put up recently. It's Mouthpiece Musings episode 2, where I talk about all the different Vincent Bach mouthpieces, and you can see that what people think are the differences between the different Bach mouthpieces in many ways are the opposite of what the difference between these mouthpieces are. It's really shocking when you look at a 7C compared to 1.5C and you see that the 1.5C is the smaller mouthpiece, and it's got a more comfortable rim that may or may not fool you into believing that it's a wider cup diameter, but it's not. And the 7C's got a deeper cup, and a different shaped entrance to the throat, and so you actually end up with the 7C being a bigger mouthpiece that's harder to play, and yet we're taught that the 1.5C is, that's the big, again, I always do this thing where I go into, this is the big boy's mouthpiece, but that is literally what I was told. I can remember very clearly a conversation I had with a cornet player back in I reckon I was probably 14 years old, and this woman literally said to me, the bigger mouthpiece you can play, the better player you are, or better player you will be. And so I went out and I bought a Dennis Wick 2, which is equivalent to a tenor horn mouthpiece. It is massive. Okay, so 17mm internal diameter isn't huge for a trumpet mouthpiece. It's a standard for orchestral playing, for example. But it's big for a cornet. Cornet is typically a smaller cup diameter. And then this thing is a deep, very deep mouthpiece, like a flugelhorn mouthpiece. And then the throat on it is 4mm. It's an absolutely huge mouthpiece. It's wildly inappropriate for anything other than playing, low parts. Trying to blend with a tenor horn on a cornet. And there was me playing principal cornet in this brass band, doing all the solos and, working very hard to achieve something for, there was no need to be putting that much effort into playing. And that actually leads me on to question 3, which was unintentional. But what else did I have to say about Jettone? I don't think I had an awful lot to say, but I think that what I mean is, so many people hear with their eyes. They see your mouthpiece and they assume that they know how you are going to play with that piece of equipment, and usually they're wrong. I think that, under certain circumstances, if you were stood behind a curtain and doing a blind test and you played the same piece of music on the two mouthpieces, as long as you've got the same sort of tone in your ear, and you're playing mechanically in the same way, you're going to sound like you more than you will sound like the equipment. I know this to be true because I've done orchestral gigs where I was playing a Calit Super Chops 3 and had compliments from the conductor and players in the woodwind section telling me that I'm really easy to blend with and all this sort of thing. And it's like, well, I don't go fishing for compliments. These people approach me and say this stuff, and it's the thing that more than anything has kept me enthusiastic about the tongue controlled embouchure, and knowing that the things that the traditions that we're taught are literally incorrect. You know, that's just there's a lot of folklore and old wives' tales about how we should approach trumpet playing, and I think a lot of it has come up only in the last 100 years. And you know, let's not speculate about the reasons. Let's just move on. So I wouldn't recommend the Jettone for orchestral playing for this one simple reason, and that is that orchestral music requires that you conform to a tradition. And that tradition is to have a certain tone that comes from using a certain type of equipment. So that doesn't mean that you have to play on a Bach 1X. It doesn't mean you have to use a Schilke 17, or it doesn't mean you have to have a big throat or a large back bore, any of these things. But what it means is that you need a sensible cup, maybe a C cup, or a C cup for a brighter sound, a B cup for a more mellow tone. Yeah, and you know, truth be told, you don't really need the upper register, or you're not playing in the upper register for long periods of time in the same way that you would be for you know, for more commercial music, marching band, etc. So again, I want to come back to the idea that if you're playing outside in a marching band, your tone isn't going to be heard all that well anyway. I don't want to ramble too much, so let's finish with this. What is the thing that makes the perfect orchestral sound? An orchestra, an entire orchestra, and you are one part of it. So where does your sound fit into that? Well, if you're on trumpet, you're sitting in the higher frequencies of the brass section. Do you want to sound like a trombone? No, you want to sound like a trumpet. So, you know, broad and bright and articulate. Use equipment that will get you that. Okay, time is going on, so let's quickly. Okay, so this is an important one. Would playing in the upper register with a deeper cup work out the chops harder than with a shallow mouthpiece, and in turn help improve range and endurance faster? I'm sorry, absolutely not. The most important thing is learning to play in the upper register without straining. If you're using bigger equipment and something that's going to give you a sound that doesn't have those bright, vibrant overtones, then you're actually training yourself to work hard. You're training yourself to stretch and press and blow and overblow, because it's the only way that an inexperienced player can force those sounds out of the instrument. But when you're using a very efficient mouthpiece, then you can learn to back off. You can learn to be more relaxed. You can learn to take a very small pinpoint aperture and a tiny vibration. I don't want to do too many demonstrations because this microphone is set up for me talking, but that sort of very small vibration with a focused airstream, that's what's getting you those high notes. And if you're playing on a wider or deeper mouthpiece, you're going to be blowing the chops into the cup to try and create that very small high frequency buzz, whereas on something small and efficient, it'll be much easier. Another issue really is about intonation, is about tuning. So changing the properties of a mouthpiece can really stretch or shrink or compress the octaves. So compressed octaves means it's sharp in the low register and flat in the upper register. And then stretched octaves, it means that it is sharp in the upper register and flat in the low register. And this is one of the things that Monet talk about in their promotional materials. They make a claim that all, standard trumpet mouthpieces, all standard trumpet mouthpieces are made for the trumpet in A, and therefore we should play on a shorter shank. That's just how they have decided to solve the problem of the compression of octaves. It's not the only solution. I don't even think it's the best solution. But that's the sort of thing, like if you consider that, you're playing on a big mouthpiece where you're struggling to play high, that means that your upper register is going to be flat, and so you're going to try and solve that by with lip intrusion. You're going to try and solve it with overblowing, squeezing and pressing, and this isn't the sort of physical effort that you need to build up. What you need to build up is power from the abdominal muscles, and lips, that the muscles of the face that respond in correlation to the correct application of air. Now that sounds very much like the Roy Stevens way of thinking, and I'm happy to leave things like that. I'm not gonna talk about how Jerome Kallett may have disagreed, because although that's the school of thought that I align myself with, what Roy Stevens talked about was universal principles. He talked about the physics of brass playing, and that is that is true whatever your methodology may be. So no, I would say what you want to do is make everything as physically easy as possible. If you can learn to play a high C with half the air and half the physical effort, then that's much better than having to strain and push and all that sort of business. So chase efficiency, chase ease of note production, using the least physical effort to create the most sound will be the ultimate way of growing your tone, power, range and endurance. And there we go. Right, I'm gonna tie this up here because it's been a long old video. Some amazingly important points have been covered, so I'm really happy to have done it. I might have to get back into the habit of splitting my videos into two, but in any case, it's just become the way that stuff takes the time to unpack. And there we go. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope that this has been helpful for those, not only the guy that asked me, the guy or girl, I actually don't know, guy or girl, who asked me the question, but do keep them coming, and I will I'll do more of these in future if it's what people want, because I actually really enjoy trying to having a bit of focus and trying to help people as much as possible.